Okay, so continuing on with our graphs. The last bit that we really have to cover, and then we'll look at maybe a couple of examples that kind of hopefully tie all this together. The last thing we really have to look at are shifts. We can go up and down, we can go left and right, and guess what? We're going to have fake axes again, so those will be fun. So here's what we're looking at. We have cosine bx plus c plus d and sine bx plus c plus d. The up or down is always this number at the end. That's the d. Okay, so for example here, I have y is equal to the sine of x minus 4. This is going to be down 4 units. And the key here is that the 4 is not in parentheses. So notice back here we have parentheses around part of it with where the x is. The 4 here is not in the parentheses. That automatically makes it the d. Okay, so in that case, it's just going to shift the whole thing down 4 units. That'll be a fake axis. We'll put our amplitude above and below. We'll look at that. Left or right? This is where we want to work with the parentheses. So you'll see here I have the parentheses equal to 0. So the easiest way to do this is to take whatever is in the parentheses and set it equal to 0. When you solve it, that will tell you where to shift to. So for instance, sine of 3x minus 2. I take my 3x minus 2 and set it equal to 0, right? The inside of the parentheses. So I add 2, I divide by 3, and that tells me I have x is equal to 2/3. What that tells me is that my whole graph is going right 2/3, and that's where that'll be like our starting point. So we'll look at a couple of examples here, and then that'll be great. Okay, so here's my first example. You'll notice I don't have a graph up there yet because honestly I ran out of room. So we're going to run through this. Then I'm going to have to erase this and I'll make the graph for us. So anyway, this is what we have. Here's what we want to graph y equals -2 cosine of 2x minus pi plus 1. So a few things. First, I found the amplitude. We have a -2 in front, but remember amplitude is always positive, so when you take its absolute value, you get 2. Now it will be flipped, and it's going to be upside down. And we'll look at that when we actually make the graph. My period is still 2 pi divided by b. Here my b is the 2. So 2 pi divided by 2, my period is pi. I'm going to count the x-axis. We take our period, and we divide by 4. Right? We all count this, we're always dividing by 4 every single time. We know it's up 1, and then we have a phase shift. That's the fancy term for left or right. We have a phase shift, and so we're going to set 2x minus pi equal to 0. So I added pi, divided by 2, and so I know that this is shifted pi over 2 units to the right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that as my starting point when I make the graph, and you'll see my fake axes here in just a minute. But right now I'm going to get this cleared out so I can make the graph. Okay, so I'm ready to make my graph now. You'll see I still have my equation here. I moved all the pertinent information that we had on that last board over here to the right, so you can see my amplitude, period, x-axis, and all that kind of stuff. All right, so I've started making my graph. I have a set of axes, and the first thing you'll notice is I made a dotted line at 1 because we are up 1 unit, right? That was the up. I also know that I need to go right pi over 2, but I'm going to let's back that up for a second. On the x-axis, I'm counting by quarters. So you'll notice I labeled pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. When I got to 4, I just called it pi, and I counted, and I went all the way to 10. Turns out that's how far I needed to go for this, but we'll see that in a second. So pi over 2 is the same as 2 pi over 4, right? It's a half. So there's where I'm going to make my starting point. Okay, so I counted my quarters along the x-axis, and I found the one that's where I want to start at, in this case 2 pi over 4. You'll notice that on my y-axis, so we went up 1, but since my amplitude was 2, I need to go all the way to 3, and then I need to go down to -1, right? There should be 2 units on either side. And now I'm really ready to go. Once I label that x-axis, once I label the y-axis and figure out where to start, we're good. We just have, now the only thing we have to watch out for here is we are up 1 unit, so my middle points are all going to be on this dotted line instead of on the x-axis. All right, it's a cosine curve. Cosine normally starts up at the top of its graph, but now it will start down at the bottom of its graph, right? Because we have the negative, it's going to be flipped over. So it's going to start down here, right there. You can barely see it. And then it goes to the middle, goes up to the top, goes back to the middle, goes back to the bottom. And of course, my numbers are getting in the way, but hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Middle, top, middle, bottom, middle, right? So my middle, again, is that line, because we moved up 1 unit, it's this dotted line. And we get a nice looking cosine curve. And there, oops, almost, there we go. Well, I actually went too far. Ignore this point, let's get rid of that one. There we go. And there we go, there's my cosine curve. And you'll see 2 full periods. A period happens when you get back to the exact same place that you started. So I started at the bottom, I went all the way up, came all the way back down. There's 1 full period, all the way up, all the way down. There's a 2nd full period. And that's really how all of this is going to work. Okay, so we go through the process. And what you'll see on the test is I'll probably ask you a bunch of questions about these kinds of things over here first. I'll have you sort through all of that. And then you'll make your graph for me. Okay, so please, go over some, do a lot of homework on this. But really, if you can do this one, you're going to be just fine on sine and cosine curves because that's really about all there is to it. So good luck.